Good evening, friends, and welcome to Bedtime Biographies, where together we unwind and drift away to the stories of remarkable lives. Before we begin tonight's journey, if you enjoy these stories, please subscribe to our channel. And do leave a comment telling us which life you'd like us to explore next. Tonight, we travel to a small bedchamber in France, May 2nd, 1519. An old man lies in his bed at the Château du Clos Lucé, his breathing shallow, his eyes fixed on something beyond the ceiling. On the table beside him rest notebooks, dozens of them, hundreds of pages filled with drawings that won't make sense for centuries. A flying machine, a diving suit, the anatomy of an unborn child rendered with impossible precision. War machines, water systems, studies of how birds bank against the wind. Francesco Melzi, his devoted pupil, sits beside him, holding his hand. The old man has lived 67 years, painted fewer than 20 pictures, finished even fewer. And yet these notebooks contain the seeds of the future: helicopters and tanks, principles of flight and hydraulics, observations that will take humanity 500 years to rediscover. How does a man see so far ahead? How does someone born in a Tuscan hillside village in 1452, denied formal education, barred from university because of illegitimate birth, come to understand what won't exist until the 20th century? This is the bedtime biography of Leonardo da Vinci. Chapter 1. The Illegitimate Son, April 15th, 1452. The hour is late, sometime after sunset, what his grandfather will record as the third hour of the night. In a stone farmhouse in Anciano, a hamlet so small it barely merits the name, a woman named Caterina gives birth to a son. She is young, perhaps 18, a peasant. The father, Ser Piero da Vinci, is a 25-year-old notary, already betrothed to another woman. The baby arrives into a world that has no proper place for him. They name him Leonardo di Ser Piero da Vinci. Leonardo, son of Ser Piero from Vinci. The Ser in his father's name marks distinction, education, a line of respected notaries. But this baby carries a different inheritance: illegitimacy. In the Italy of 1452, this single fact will shape everything. He cannot follow his father's profession. He cannot attend university. He cannot learn Latin in the formal schools. He exists between worlds, acknowledged by his father, but not quite legitimate, not quite free. For his first 5 years, Leonardo lives with Caterina in Anciano. The farmhouse sits among olive groves and vineyard terraces. The Arno Valley stretches below, the town of Vinci perched on its hill above. Perhaps this is where it begins, the gift of seeing. A small boy watching light move across limestone cliffs, observing how water flows in the stream, noting the precise way a lizard moves across warm stone. His mother remarries, an artisan, a man of her own station. She will have 5 more children. Leonardo moves to his father's household in Vinci proper, into the care of his grandfather Antonio and his uncle Francesco. Ser Piero, meanwhile, marries the 16-year-old Albiera. He is building his notarial practice in Florence, establishing himself, often absent. It is Uncle Francesco who becomes the boy's companion. Francesco loves the countryside, has no interest in the family's professional ambitions. He walks with Leonardo through the Tuscan hills. They observe together the branching of trees, the spirals and snail shells, the way hawks circle on thermal currents. No books, no formal instruction, just the world itself, offering its lessons to anyone patient enough to watch. The boy draws. On whatever paper he can find, he sketches what he sees. His father notices. Ser Piero is practical, ambitious. An illegitimate son cannot be a notary, cannot enter the learned professions. But the boy has talent, undeniable talent. And in Florence, in this golden age of the early Renaissance, there is a profession for talented hands. Perhaps the illegitimacy is not only loss, perhaps it is also freedom. Leonardo will never be bound by the classical education that shapes other minds, never forced into his father's profession, never required to think in the established patterns. He is from birth an outsider, and outsiders sometimes see what others cannot. The question forms early: what will this boy become? Chapter 2. The Workshop, Florence, 1466. Leonardo is 14 years old when his father takes him through the narrow streets to the workshop of Andrea del Verrocchio. The city pulses with life, merchants calling their wares, the clang of metal work from nearby studios, the bells of Santa Maria del Fiore echoing across terracotta roofs. This is Florence at its zenith, the Medici family transforming it into the jewel of the Renaissance. Public festivals fill the piazzas with music and spectacle. Ideas flow like the Arno itself. Ser Piero has brought some of his son's drawings to show Verrocchio. The master examines them and agrees to take the boy as a garzone, a studio boy, the lowest rank of apprentice. Leonardo enters a new world. Verrocchio's bottega occupies a series of rooms near Ser Piero's notarial office. Inside, it smells of linseed oil and marble dust, of wet plaster and wood shavings. The workshop is organized chaos, half-finished sculptures draped in damp cloth, panels prepared with gesso waiting for paint, bronze castings cooling in the corner. This is not merely an art studio, it is a factory of creation, producing everything from painted altarpieces to golden wedding ornaments to architectural designs. Leonardo begins as all apprentices begin, grinding pigments with mortar and pestle, the ultramarine blue made from crushed lapis lazuli, the vermilion from cinnabar. He sweeps floors, cleans brushes in turpentine until his hands burn, prepares wooden panels with layer after layer of gesso until they are smooth as glass. The work is menial, repetitive, but his eyes are always watching. Verrocchio himself is master of many disciplines: painter, sculptor, goldsmith, engineer. He studied under the great Donatello, serves as official sculptor to the Medici. More importantly, he is a teacher. He demands his apprentices understand anatomy, study the mechanical principles beneath beautiful surfaces, observe how light transforms fabric into sculptural form. His workshop contains not just tools, but books, a rarity. Ideas are discussed over the communal dinner table. Other apprentices work alongside Leonardo. Sandro Botticelli has already moved on, but Pietro Perugino is here, and Domenico Ghirlandaio and young Lorenzo di Credi. They are learning together, competing, collaborating. This is how Renaissance art happens, not solitary geniuses in isolation, but workshops full of talented hands working under a master's direction. After perhaps 2 years of menial tasks, Leonardo is allowed to draw, first copying his master's works, then drawing from plaster casts, then from life. His drawings of draped fabric become extraordinary, the way cloth falls and folds, catching light and shadow. He sketches faces in the street, hands in different positions, the musculature beneath skin. By 1472, at 20 years old, Leonardo qualifies as a master in the Guild of St. Luke, the Guild of Artists and Doctors of Medicine. He could leave, establish his own workshop. Instead, he stays. His attachment to Verrocchio runs deep, and the projects are too interesting to abandon. Then comes the commission that changes everything. Verrocchio is painting the Baptism of Christ for the Church of San Salvi. He assigns Leonardo to paint one of the angels, the figure on the left, holding Christ's robe. Leonardo paints it with such delicate grace. such subtle modeling of flesh and fabric that it makes the rest of the painting look stiff by comparison. Vasari, the great biographer, will later claim that Verrocchio was so shamed by his pupil's skill that he put down his brushes forever and never painted again. The truth is likely simpler. Verrocchio recognized genius when he saw it. Chapter 3. The Letter. Florence, 1481. Leonardo is 29 years old and restless. He has spent 15 years in Verrocchio's orbit, absorbing everything the city can teach him. He has received commissions, an altarpiece for the Palazzo Vecchio, another for the monks of San Donato. But something pulls at him, an ambition that Florence cannot satisfy. The great works he envisions require greater resources, grander patronage, freedom to explore not just painting, but engineering, architecture, the mechanical arts. His eyes turn north to Milan. Milan is different from Florence in almost every way. Where Florence is a republic, proud of its civic traditions and merchant wealth, Milan is ruled by a duke, Ludovico Sforza, called Il Moro, the Moor, for his dark complexion. Where Florence celebrates painters and poets, Milan needs engineers and military architects. The city-states of Italy exist in constant tension, alliances shifting like sand, condottieri, mercenary captains, selling their services to the highest bidder. War is not a distant possibility, but an ever-present reality. Leonardo understands this, and so he writes a letter. The letter is astonishing in its audacity, in the way it presents Leonardo not as he is, but as he wishes to be seen. It is an act of self-invention, a Renaissance resume written by a man who grasps that identity is something one can craft. He begins by listing his military capabilities. He can design portable bridges for armies to cross rivers under fire. He knows how to drain moats surrounding fortresses. He can construct covered vehicles, safe, indestructible, that can break through enemy lines with their artillery. He can design catapults, mangonels, trabocchi, and other instruments of war. He can build cannon that can shower the enemy with hail. He understands siege warfare, can create underground passages and secret tunnels. Item after item, Leonardo catalogues abilities he has imagined more than executed. He writes with absolute confidence. When the situation forbids cannon, he can provide crossbows, catapults, and other engines of marvelous efficiency. In naval matters, he can design ships that resist the heaviest bombardment. On and on the letter goes, 9 full paragraphs devoted to war. Only at the end, almost as an afterthought, does he mention, "In time of peace, I believe I can give perfect satisfaction, equal to any other, in architecture, in the construction of buildings both public and private, and in conducting water from one place to another. Also, I can carry out sculpture in marble, bronze, or clay. And also I can do in painting whatever may be done, as well as any other, be he who he may. As well as any other, be he who he may." The quiet confidence of this phrase, he does not beg. He does not flatter excessively. He simply states what he can do and leaves the Duke to decide. But Leonardo understands that letters alone do not secure patronage. He needs an introduction, a way to be noticed. Lorenzo de' Medici, the unofficial ruler of Florence, provides it. Leonardo is sent to Milan bearing a gift for the Duke, a silver lyre crafted in the shape of a horse's head. Leonardo himself will present it, will play music, for he is an accomplished musician, his voice reportedly beautiful. Art and politics intertwine. He arrives in Milan in 1482, leaving behind in Florence his unfinished commission, the Adoration of the Magi. The monks who hired him are left with a remarkable underdrawing on panel a complex composition of figures and horses and architectural elements, but no completed painting. This pattern will repeat throughout his life, the vision grander than the execution, the next idea more compelling than finishing the current work. Milan receives him, perhaps the lyre impresses, perhaps the letter's bold claims intrigue Ludovico, perhaps the Duke simply recognizes talent when he sees it. Leonardo enters Sforza's service, not primarily as a painter, but as he wished, as an engineer, an inventor, a designer of wonders. The city becomes his laboratory. Milan is larger than Florence, more cosmopolitan, more technologically ambitious. It has canals that need engineering, fortifications that need strengthening, a court that loves elaborate festivals requiring ingenious theatrical machinery. Leonardo will design pageants where mountains open to reveal singing angels, where mechanical lions walk across the hall and open their chests to display lilies. But the grandest commission is still to come, a bronze equestrian monument to Francesco Sforza, Ludovico's father and predecessor. It will be the largest bronze sculpture ever attempted, a technical marvel, a testament to both the Sforza dynasty and to Leonardo's engineering genius. For now, though, Leonardo settles into his new life. He establishes a workshop, takes on assistants and apprentices. He begins to keep notebooks more systematically, small volumes he can carry in his belt, recording everything he observes. The notebooks fill with sketches, fortifications, yes, but also studies of water flow, observations of bird wings, anatomical drawings, ideas for machines that won't exist for 500 years. He has reinvented himself, just as the letter promised. No longer merely a painter from Florence, he is Leonardo, engineer to the Duke of Milan. The question remains, can he deliver what he has promised? In Milan, Leonardo would create his greatest painting and his greatest failure. Chapter 4. The Supper. Milan, 1495. The Dominican friars of Santa Maria delle Grazie have a problem. Their refectory, the dining hall where the monks take their meals, has a large wall that needs decoration. Ludovico Sforza, Leonardo's patron, suggests the perfect subject, the Last Supper, and he knows exactly who should paint it. Leonardo accepts the commission. He has been in Milan for 13 years now, and while he has designed festivals and war machines, sketched inventions and studied anatomy, he has completed relatively few paintings. This will be different. This will be his masterpiece. The wall itself presents challenges. It is not an ideal surface, prone to dampness, positioned above doorways that break the composition. Traditional fresco technique requires working quickly into wet plaster, painting each section in a single day before it dries. But Leonardo does not work quickly. He observes, contemplates, changes his mind, reworks. Fresco will not allow this. So he invents his own technique. He will paint in tempera and oil on dry plaster, mixing his pigments with a binding medium that will let him work slowly, building up layers, returning to areas again and again. It is experimental, it is risky, but it will give him the control he needs. The subject is familiar. Jesus and his 12 apostles at the moment Christ declares, "One of you will betray me." But Leonardo's treatment is revolutionary. Where earlier artists painted the Last Supper as a static arrangement of figures, Leonardo captures a single instant of drama. The words have just been spoken. The apostles react. He spends months studying faces in the streets of Milan. He watches how people respond to shocking news, the gestures of disbelief, of horror, of protestation. He sketches hands in different positions, the angle of a turning head, the body language of innocence and guilt. His notebooks fill with studies. The composition organizes the apostles into 4 groups of 3, rippling outward from Christ at the center. Each man reacts according to his character. Peter leans forward aggressively, knife already in hand, always ready for violence. John, young and beautiful, slumps in shock. Judas recoils, his face shadowed, one hand clutching the purse of silver. Matthew gestures toward Christ, palms open. Why? Thomas points upward, to heaven, in protest. Every figure tells a story through posture alone. The prior of the monastery grows impatient. He complains to Ludovico. The painter stands motionless before the wall for hours, not touching brush to plaster. Then suddenly he rushes in, makes a few strokes, and leaves. This is not how painting is supposed to work. Ludovico questions Leonardo, who explains with perfect composure that men of genius sometimes accomplish more when they work least. He is thinking, solving problems, seeing the painting complete in his mind before his hand executes it. The prior wants the head of Judas finished. Leonardo says sweetly that if necessary, he could use the prior's face as the model for Judas. The complaints cease. The work progresses through 1496, 1497, into 1498. Jesus sits serene at the vanishing point, hands spread on the table, one palm up, one down, accepting what must come. The perspective draws every line toward him. Light falls from windows painted on the wall to match the actual windows of the refectory, creating the illusion that the scene exists in the same space as the dining monks. By 1498, it is finished. Visitors come to see it. They stand in silence. The painting does what Leonardo intended. It captures not eternity, but a moment, not symbols, but human psychology, not divine figures, but men confronting betrayal and death. The tragic irony becomes apparent almost immediately. Leonardo's experimental technique is failing. The paint does not bond properly to the wall. Within 20 years, it begins to flake. Within 50, the image is badly deteriorated. But the composition remains, and the revolution it represents, that painting can capture time itself, the instant between words and consequence, that endures. Chapter 5. The notebooks begin Milan, the 1490s. Leonardo carries small notebooks tucked into his belt, always within reach. When something catches his attention, the way water swirls around a bridge piling, the musculature of a horse's leg, the shadow cast by a distant tower, he stops, removes a notebook, and draws. These are not idle sketches. They are a record of the world as it actually is, stripped of assumption and convention. But something about these notebooks is strange. The writing moves from right to left across the page. Each letter is reversed, as if reflected in a mirror. To read Leonardo's notes, you must hold them up to glass, or train your eye to decipher the backward script. Why does he write this way? Theories abound. Some say it is secrecy, Leonardo hiding his discoveries from those who might steal them. Others point to his left-handedness. Perhaps mirror writing simply feels more natural, his hand moving away from the text rather than smudging across fresh ink. Still others suggest it is neither secrecy nor convenience, but simply how his mind works, thinking in reverse, seeing differently than other men. Whatever the reason, the notebooks accumulate, page after page, year after year. By the end of his life, there will be thousands of pages. Estimates suggest 13,000, though many have been lost. What survives is astonishing in its range. On a single page, Leonardo might sketch a design for a fortification, then shift to observations about the flight of birds, then add notes about light reflecting off water, then draw a grotesque human face, all without transition, without organizing principle. The notebooks are not books in any traditional sense. They are thinking made visible, curiosity recorded in real time. The drawings themselves represent a revolution in technical illustration. Before Leonardo, craftsmen and engineers worked from memory and tradition, passing knowledge orally from master to apprentice. Leonardo draws what he calls dimostrazione, demonstrations. He invents the exploded view, showing how parts of a machine fit together by separating them in space. He draws cross-sections, showing internal mechanisms. He creates the visual language that modern engineering still uses. Here is a design for what we would call a helicopter, Leonardo's aerial screw. A linen-covered spiral, perhaps 15 feet across, mounted on a central shaft. Men would run around the base, turning a winch, spinning the screw faster and faster, until, in theory, it would lift itself into the air by pushing down on the atmosphere. The principle is sound. The execution, with 15th century materials and human muscle power, is impossible. But Leonardo draws it anyway, working out the mechanics, imagining flight. Here is a design for an armored vehicle, shaped like a turtle's shell, mounted with cannons pointing in all directions. It could move across a battlefield, protecting the men inside while raining fire on enemies. We call it a tank. Leonardo calls it a covered chariot. Scholars notice something curious. The gears he draws would turn the wheels in opposite directions. The vehicle could never move forward. Some believe this is deliberate. Leonardo, the pacifist, sabotaging his own war machine, ensuring it could never be built and used to kill. Here are submarines, diving suits, parachutes, contact lenses, automated bobbin winders, ball bearings, canal locks, excavation machines. Some are practical improvements on existing technology. Others are pure imagination, waiting for a future that has the materials and power sources to realize them. But the notebooks are not only machines. Leonardo observes everything. He dissects flowers, drawing their structures with botanical precision. He studies water, how it flows, how it forms whirlpools and eddies, how rivers erode their banks. He watches clouds, trying to understand weather. He examines rocks, finding fossils of sea creatures embedded in mountain stone, and concludes that these mountains were once underwater, that the earth changes over vast stretches of time. He begins systematic anatomical studies. At first, his interest is artistic. He needs to understand muscle and bone to paint convincing human figures. But the investigation becomes its own obsession. He obtains permission to dissect human corpses at Milan's hospitals. In cold rooms, by candlelight, racing against decomposition, he opens bodies and draws what he finds. The chambers of the heart, the branching of blood vessels, the fetus curled in the womb, the layers of the eye, the structure of the skull. All of this goes into the notebooks, knowledge accumulating, observation layered upon observation. But Leonardo publishes none of it. The discoveries remain private, known only to him and perhaps a few close associates. The notebooks are not written for an audience. They are Leonardo thinking to himself in mirror script about everything that puzzles and fascinates him. A pattern emerges. Leonardo sees connections others miss. The branching of trees mirrors the branching of blood vessels, which mirrors the branching of rivers. The spirals in water echo the spirals in hair, in shells, in the curled form of an embryo. Patterns repeat across scales, from the microscopic to the cosmic. Leonardo is looking for the principles beneath the surface, the rules that govern all things. The future is being designed in these notebooks, but the future cannot yet read them. But his most ambitious project would never leave the ground. Chapter 6. The Great Horse Milan, 1482. One of Leonardo's first commissions from Ludovico Sforza is also his most audacious. Create a bronze equestrian statue honoring Francesco Sforza, Ludovico's father and the founder of the Sforza dynasty. It will be a monument to rival the ancients, larger than any bronze sculpture attempted in modern times. It will announce Milan's greatness and the Sforza family's glory. Leonardo accepts. The project consumes him for 17 years. He begins with horses. He has always loved them, their power, their grace, the complex mechanics of their movement. Now he studies them with scientific intensity. He measures every dimension, the length from shoulder to hoof, the circumference of the neck, the angle of the haunches. He dissects dead horses, drawing their musculature and skeletal structure. He observes living horses in motion, walking, trotting, galloping, rearing. His notebooks fill with equine anatomy. The scale grows in his imagination. The statue will stand 24 feet tall. The horse will rear on its hind legs, Francesco Sforza astride it in full armor. The technical challenges are immense. Bronze casting at this scale has never been done. The weight of the rider and rearing horse, all in bronze, must balance on the two hind legs. The physics seem impossible. Leonardo calculates, experiments, redesigns. Perhaps the rearing pose is too ambitious. He shifts to a walking horse, more stable, still magnificent. He designs the casting process, the molds, the furnaces, the channels through which molten bronze will flow. He estimates he will need 70 tons of bronze, more metal than has ever been used for a single sculpture. By 1493, the full-scale clay model is complete. It stands in the courtyard of the Sforza castle, enormous, breathtaking. Visitors come from across Italy to see it. The sculptor Michelangelo himself sees it, though later he will cruelly suggest that Leonardo lacks the skill to actually cast it in bronze. The model becomes known as the Gran Cavallo, the great horse. It is already, in clay, Leonardo's triumph. But bronze requires more than vision. It requires resources, funding, political stability. And in 1494, politics shift. Charles VIII of France prepares to invade Italy. Milan needs cannons, not monuments. Ludovico redirects the 70 tons of bronze reserved for Leonardo's horse to the foundries. They cast it into weapons instead. Leonardo's notebooks from this period show his bitterness, his calculations for the monument annotated with notes about war preparations. The clay model remains standing in the courtyard, waiting for bronze that will never come. Then in 1499, everything collapses. The French army invades. Ludovico Sforza flees Milan. French soldiers occupy the city. They discover the great horse standing in the courtyard, 24 feet of clay, a representation of power and ambition. The Gascon crossbowmen use it for target practice. Arrows pierce it. It begins to crumble. By the time the French leave, the Gran Cavallo is destroyed. 17 years of work, thousands of drawings, revolutionary techniques for casting bronze, all reduced to fragments of clay scattered across cobblestones. Leonardo will never complete a monumental sculpture. The horses he painted, in the Battle of Anghiari, in the Adoration of the Magi, will have to carry his equestrian dreams. Some visions are too large for the world that contains them. When Milan fell, Leonardo became a wanderer. Chapter 7. The Wandering Years. December 1499. Milan has fallen to the French army. Ludovico Sforza, Leonardo's patron for 17 years, has fled the city. The workshop Leonardo built, the life he established, the projects in progress, all must be abandoned. At 47 years old, he packs what he can carry. Notebooks, drawings, a few paintings, his instruments. His closest students accompany him. Together, they leave Milan and enter a period of wandering that will last nearly 4 years. First, Venice. The serene Republic has heard of Leonardo's engineering prowess and faces its own military threat, the Ottoman Turks. The Venetian Senate consults him on defensive measures. Leonardo surveys the coastline, considers the problems of naval invasion. He proposes a system of movable dams that could flood the approaches to the city, drowning enemy troops. He sketches diving suits that would allow Venetian defenders to attack ships from below, sabotaging hulls. His ideas are ingenious, expensive, impractical. Venice thanks him and implements none of them. After a few months, he moves on. Next, Mantua. Isabella d'Este, one of the great art patrons of the age, has been trying to commission work from Leonardo for years. She wants a portrait. Leonardo sketches her in chalk, a beautiful drawing, her profile elegant, her elaborate hairstyle rendered with delicate precision. She is delighted. She asks for the portrait to be completed in paint. Leonardo promises, takes the drawing with him, and never paints it. The cartoon, the preparatory drawing, is all she will ever receive. This too is a pattern. Leonardo giving just enough to satisfy temporarily, then moving on before completion. By spring of 1500, Leonardo returns to Florence. He has been gone for 18 years. The city has changed. Lorenzo de' Medici, the Magnificent, who made Florence a center of Renaissance culture, has died. In his place came Savonarola, the puritanical Dominican friar who condemned luxury and art, who organized bonfires of vanities where Florentines burned books and paintings. Savonarola himself was eventually burned at the stake in 1498, but his shadow lingers. The Florence Leonardo returns to is more sober, more republican, less certain of its aesthetic indulgences. Still, Florence receives its famous son warmly. Leonardo is now recognized as a master. The Servite monks offer him lodging in their monastery and provide a workshop. Word spreads that Leonardo da Vinci has returned. People come to see what he will create. He begins a cartoon, a full-scale preparatory drawing of the Virgin and Child with St. Anne and St. John the Baptist. When he displays it, Vasari reports, people flock to see it as if they were attending a great festival. Men and women, young and old, crowd into the room for 2 days, marveling at the composition, the psychological interaction between the figures, the grace of the execution. But Florence also brings competition. Michelangelo Buonarroti, 23 years younger than Leonardo, has recently completed his David, 17 feet of marble perfection, placed prominently in the Piazza della Signoria. Michelangelo is hot-tempered, aggressive, dismissive of Leonardo's failure to complete the great horse. The rivalry is personal and bitter. Both men are prickly, proud. When they encounter each other in the street, the exchanges are frosty at best. In 1503, Florence offers both artists an opportunity and a challenge. The Signoria wants the great hall of the Palazzo Vecchio decorated with massive frescoes depicting Florentine military victories. They commission Michelangelo to paint the Battle of Cassina on one wall. Leonardo will paint the Battle of Anghiari on the opposite wall. The city will have a direct comparison of its two greatest artists working at the peak of their powers. Leonardo accepts. He chooses the moment of cavalry clash at the Battle of Anghiari, a Florentine victory from 1440. His preparatory drawings are spectacular. Horses and men entangled in violent struggle, faces twisted in fury and desperation. The chaos of combat rendered with unprecedented psychological intensity. The studies of horses show everything he learned from the Gran Cavallo project. The studies of angry men reveal his deep understanding of how emotion manifests in facial expression. But again, the execution becomes problematic. Leonardo experiments with a new painting medium, mixing oil with his pigments to paint on the dry plaster wall. The technique fails. The paint refuses to bond properly. Colors run. The image begins to deteriorate even as he works. Parts of the composition are magnificent. The central group of horsemen fighting over a battle standard is among his greatest achievements. But the wall defeats him. By 1506, the painting is abandoned, partially completed, already deteriorating. Michelangelo, meanwhile, completes only the cartoon for his battle scene before being summoned to Rome by the Pope. Neither battle will be finished. Eventually, both will be destroyed or painted over. Only copies survive, echoes of what might have been. During these Florence years, another commission arrives. A silk merchant named Francesco del Giocondo asks Leonardo to paint a portrait of his wife, Lisa Gherardini. Leonardo begins the painting sometime in 1503. It is a small panel, relatively simple in composition. A woman seated, hands folded, gazing at the viewer with a slight smile. Leonardo works on it intermittently. He carries it with him when he travels. He is never satisfied with it, never delivers it to the merchant who commissioned it. And then, in 1502, a strange interlude. Leonardo enters the service of Cesare Borgia, the illegitimate son of Pope Alexander VI, one of the most ruthless and feared condottieri in Italy. Cesare is expanding his territory through the Romagna, conquering cities, eliminating rivals. He needs a military engineer and architect. Leonardo, the gentle vegetarian who reportedly bought caged birds just to set them free, becomes the instrument of a man who murders his enemies without hesitation. For 10 months, Leonardo travels through central Italy with Borgia's army. He maps territories with unprecedented precision, designs fortifications, surveys towns. His maps are works of art, bird's-eye views rendered with geometric accuracy. He observes everything, records everything, judges nothing in his notebooks. The moral complexity of this arrangement, genius serving tyranny, goes unremarked. By early 1503, Borgia's power is collapsing. Leonardo quietly departs, returning to Florence and to the portrait of Lisa Gherardini, which will eventually be called the Mona Lisa. In this period of wandering, he began his most famous work. Chapter 8. The Woman Who Smiles. Florence, 1503. Francesco del Giocondo is a successful silk merchant, prosperous enough to commission a portrait from the city's most famous artist. His wife, Lisa, is in her mid-20s, her third child recently born, her position in Florentine society secure. The portrait is meant to commemorate either the purchase of their new home or perhaps the birth of their son. It is a domestic commission, nothing particularly special. Portraits are common work for artists, expected to be completed within months. Leonardo begins. The panel is small, poplar wood, roughly 30 inches by 21 inches. Lisa sits for him in his workshop, posing in the conventional three-quarter view. She wears dark, simple clothing, no jewelry, no ostentation. Her hands are folded, relaxed. She looks directly at the viewer, and she smiles. That smile. Even from the beginning, Leonardo knows something is happening with that smile. It is not the fixed, formal expression of conventional portraiture. It is subtle, alive, ambiguous. The corners of her mouth lift slightly, her eyes engage. Is she amused, knowing, sad, serene? The expression shifts depending on where the viewer looks, on the light, on the viewer's own mood. Leonardo employs his technique of sfumato, vanished or smoky in Italian. Instead of defined lines separating forms, he builds up transparent layers of paint, letting colors blend into each other, creating soft transitions between light and shadow. The edges of Lisa's face seem to emerge from darkness rather than being outlined against it. The effect is atmospheric, as if she exists in actual space rather than on a flat surface. Behind her, Leonardo paints an imaginary landscape, not the actual view from any window, but a dreamscape of his own invention. Mountains recede into bluish distance, their geological formations rendered with the precision of his scientific studies. A winding road leads down to a bridge over a river. On the other side, different elevations, as if the landscape itself is impossible, the two sides not quite matching. Some scholars believe this represents the world in flux, the Earth's surface changing over time. The vision of a geologist who has studied erosion and sedimentation. The more Leonardo works on the painting, the more it fascinates him. He has painted many portraits, Ginevra de' Benci, Cecilia Gallerani holding her ermine, the unfinished portrait of Isabella d'Este. But this one is different. Lisa becomes more than Lisa. She becomes an ideal, a mystery, a study in what paint can capture of human presence. Months pass. A year. Francesco del Giocondo inquires about the portrait. Leonardo says it is not finished. He continues working on it, adding layers so thin they are almost invisible, adjusting the shadows around her eyes, refining the modeling of her hands. Those hands, they are painted with the precision of anatomical study, tendons and bones, visible beneath the soft flesh, the fingers tapering naturally. They are among the most perfectly rendered hands in all of painting. The painting never reaches Francesco del Giocondo. Leonardo cannot part with it. When he leaves Florence again in 1506, returning to Milan, he takes the portrait with him. When he moves to Rome in 1513, it travels with him. When he crosses the Alps to France in 1516, the painting is among the three he carries. This, the Virgin and Child with St. Anne, and St. John the Baptist, his essential works, the ones he cannot abandon. In France, in his final years at Clos-Lucé, Leonardo still works on Lisa's portrait, adding touches, adjusting, refining. It will never be finished because finished implies complete, and Leonardo's vision always exceeds completion. After his death, the painting enters the French royal collection. Over centuries it will be called La Joconde, the jocund one, the playful one, a pun on her married name, Giocondo. In English, she becomes the Mona Lisa, Mona being a contraction of Madonna, or My Lady. The painting will survive revolution and world wars. It will be stolen in 1911 and recovered in 1913, the theft making it world famous. It will hang in the Louvre behind bulletproof glass, gazed upon by millions who travel to Paris specifically to see it, to stand before that enigmatic smile and wonder what Leonardo saw in a merchant's wife that warranted such obsessive attention. Perhaps he saw what he always sought, the place where art and life merge, where painted surface becomes living presence, where observation transforms into mystery. But Leonardo was not only painting the human form, he was dissecting it. Chapter 9. Inside the Body Milan, 1508. The night is cold, which is necessary for this work. In a hospital morgue, by the light of oil lamps and candles, Leonardo stands over a human corpse. He has permission from the hospital authorities, granted because of his fame, his seriousness of purpose, his artistic credentials. But Leonardo's interest has moved far beyond what an artist needs to know. He makes the first incision. The smell is overwhelming. Decay begins quickly, even in winter. Leonardo works methodically, racing against decomposition. He has perhaps 2 or 3 days before the body becomes unusable. His tools are simple: knives of various sizes, saws for bone, hooks to pull tissue aside. Beside him, paper and chalk for drawing. What he discovers, he draws. Not schematic diagrams, but precise representations of what he actually sees. The layers of muscle wrapping the arm, the tendons that connect muscle to bone, the network of blood vessels branching like trees. He draws cross-sections of the skull, showing the brain cavity, the sinuses, the delicate structures of the inner ear. He searches for the sensus communis, the common sense, which medieval philosophers believed resided at the exact center of the head, the place where all sensory information merged into consciousness. Over the next several years, Leonardo dissects more than 30 human bodies. He works in Milan, in Rome, wherever he can obtain permission. Sometimes he collaborates with Marcantonio della Torre, a professor of anatomy at the University of Pavia. Together, they explore, discovering what the medical texts do not describe. Leonardo determines that the heart has 4 chambers, not 2, as physicians since Galen have claimed. He traces the circulatory system, drawing the branching of arteries and veins with astonishing accuracy. He dissects the eye, understanding the lens, the optic nerve, how the image is inverted and somehow corrected by the brain. He opens the chest of an old man who died peacefully and examines the hardened arteries, recognizing atherosclerosis, though he has no word for it. His most remarkable drawings show the fetus in the womb. Somehow, perhaps from a woman who died pregnant, perhaps from other mammals, Leonardo renders the curled infant, the umbilical cord, the layers of the uterus with precision that matches modern medical textbooks. These drawings, done in 1510 or 1511, represent the first accurate depiction of prenatal development in Western art. He makes over 240 detailed anatomical drawings. He writes approximately 13,000 words toward a treatise on anatomy. He plans to publish, to share these discoveries with the world, but he never does. The drawings remain in his notebooks, unknown to the medical community. The discoveries die with him. It will be centuries before anatomy catches up to what Leonardo saw by candlelight in cold morgues, drawing what no one else thought to observe so carefully. As his body aged, his mind reached for the skies. Chapter 10. The Obsession with Flight. There is a memory Leonardo records from his childhood, perhaps real, perhaps invented, certainly significant. He writes of lying in his cradle when a bird descended from the sky, a kite or perhaps a hawk. It hovered over him, opened his mouth with its tail feathers, and struck him repeatedly about the lips. The memory, or dream, or fantasy haunts him. From earliest consciousness, the idea of flight has called to him. By the early 1500s, this fascination has become systematic study. Leonardo fills entire notebooks with observations of birds. Not casual sketches, but detailed analysis of how wings work, how birds achieve lift, maintain balance, turn, descend. He watches kites circling on thermal currents above the Tuscan hills, their wings motionless, yet somehow climbing. He observes swallows darting after insects, their rapid changes of direction. He studies pigeons landing, the precise angle at which they present their wings to slow their descent. In one notebook, the Codex on the Flight of Birds, he writes, "A bird is an instrument working according to mathematical law, which instrument it is within the capacity of man to reproduce with all its movements. This is the conviction that drives him, that flight is not magic but mechanics, that if he can understand the principles, he can replicate them." His drawings show dozens of wing designs. Some mimic bat wings, membranes stretched between elongated finger bones. Others copy bird wings, feathers arranged in overlapping layers. He calculates wingspan relative to body weight. He measures the surface area needed to lift a man. He designs harnesses where a human operator would lie prone, pumping handles to flap mechanical wings. These are ornithopters, from the Greek ornithos, bird, and pteron, wing, machines that would fly by flapping. The problem, which Leonardo half recognizes, is power. Human muscles cannot generate sufficient force to lift human weight through flapping. Birds have massive pectoral muscles relative to their body mass, hollow bones to reduce weight, and respiratory systems far more efficient than mammalian lungs. A man strapped into Leonardo's ornithopter could flap the wings, but never fast enough or strong enough to achieve flight. Still, he persists. If flapping will not work, perhaps gliding will. He designs fixed-wing aircraft, closer to modern gliders. The pilot would control surfaces with his hands and feet, shifting his weight to steer. These designs are more plausible. They require no powered flight, only the courage to launch from a height and the skill to control the descent. Then there is the aerial screw, the design that most resembles a modern helicopter. A large spiral of linen stretched over a frame, mounted on a vertical axis. Men running in a circle would turn the shaft, spinning the screw faster and faster. Leonardo's notes suggest he believes that if it spins fast enough, it will screw itself into the air, rising as a screw penetrates wood. The principle is not entirely wrong. Helicopters do work by pushing air downward to generate lift. But Leonardo's design has insurmountable problems. The frame would be too heavy, human power too weak. The torque would spin the base in the opposite direction unless counterbalanced. And yet the imagination is there, the insight that vertical flight is theoretically possible. He also designs a parachute, a pyramid of sealed linen cloth held open by wooden poles. His notes claim, if a man has a tent made of linen of which the apertures have all been stopped up, and it will be 12 braccia across and 12 in depth, he will be able to throw himself down from any great height without suffering any injury. Modern testing has proven him right. His parachute design works, though its weight makes landing dangerous. There is a legend, unverified, that Leonardo or one of his assistants actually tested a flying machine from Montececheri near Florence. The legend claims a crash, injuries, Leonardo's final acceptance that human flight would not be achieved in his lifetime. Whether true or not, the notebooks remain filled with wings and calculations, with dreams of soaring. Leonardo understands that he is too early, that the materials and power sources do not yet exist. But he can see the future, a future where humans would fly. He writes, "There shall be wings. If the accomplishment be not for me, 'tis for some other." He was right. It took 400 years. Yet some predictions required no machinery, only observation. Chapter 11. The Natural Philosopher. Somewhere in the mountains of northern Italy, perhaps during his travels with Cesare Borgia or his wanderings between cities, Leonardo finds fossils. Seashells embedded in rock, far from any ocean, high in the hills. For most people of his time, these are curiosities, perhaps evidence of the biblical flood, the waters that covered the earth depositing sea creatures on mountaintops. Leonardo looks more carefully. He examines the shells, notes their preservation, observes the layers of rock around them, and he reaches a different conclusion. These mountains were once seabeds. The earth itself moves, changes, rises, and falls over vast stretches of time that dwarf human history. The shells did not arrive in a 40-day flood, but accumulated over ages when this land lay beneath ancient oceans. This is geology, though the word does not yet exist. This is deep time, though religious chronology allows the Earth only 6,000 years. Leonardo writes his observations in his notebooks, matter-of-factly, without proclamation or controversy. He is simply recording what the evidence shows. His study of water becomes obsession. He watches rivers, noting how they erode banks on the outside of curves, how they deposit sediment on the inside. He observes that water flows faster at the surface than the bottom, faster in the center than at the edges. He studies whirlpools, trying to understand their spiral motion. He designs canals and lock systems, applying his understanding of hydraulics to practical engineering. His drawings of water movement are beautiful, swirls and eddies rendered with curving lines, the turbulence behind obstacles, the way water falls and splashes. He sees patterns everywhere. The spiral of water matches the spiral of hair. The branching of rivers mirrors the branching of trees, which mirrors the branching of blood vessels. Nature uses the same designs at different scales. In his botanical studies, Leonardo draws plants with scientific precision, but also with an eye toward pattern. He notes how leaves arrange themselves on stems to maximize sunlight exposure, spiraling upward in mathematical ratios. He observes how roots mirror branches. The tree above ground is reflected in the tree below. He measures tree rings, recognizing that they record years of growth, that their width varies with weather conditions. Then there are his observations about light and astronomy. He understands that the moon does not generate its own light, but reflects the sun's. He records that the Earth shines upon the moon as well, creating the phenomenon we call earthshine, the faint illumination of the moon's dark portion during a crescent phase. He writes casually that the sun does not move, recognizing that the Earth orbits the sun, not the reverse. This is decades before Copernicus publishes his heliocentric theory, a century before Galileo faces the Inquisition for teaching it. Most remarkably, Leonardo accepts human evolution as obvious fact. His comparative anatomy, dissecting humans alongside cows, horses, bears, monkeys, reveals structural similarities that suggest common origin. In an outline for a planned treatise on anatomy, he writes about the description of man, which includes that of such creatures as are almost of the same species, as apes, monkeys, and the like, which are many, almost of the same species. He does not argue the point, does not defend it against theological objection. He simply observes the anatomical evidence and states the conclusion. 3.5 centuries before Darwin publishes On the Origin of Species, Leonardo sees the kinship between humans and other primates as self-evident. These insights remain private, locked in mirror writing in notebooks scattered across Italy. Leonardo does not publish treatises challenging church doctrine. He does not debate theologians about the age of the earth or the fixity of species. He is not seeking controversy. He is simply observing, recording, thinking through what the evidence suggests. Perhaps this is why his scientific discoveries had so little immediate impact. They were too far ahead, yes, but also too private. Science advances through publication, debate, verification by others. Leonardo's science remained solitary, brilliant observations made by one man, seen by almost no one, lost when he died. Still, the observations were correct. When his notebooks were finally studied in the 19th and 20th centuries, scholars found geology, paleontology, hydrodynamics, comparative anatomy, all worked out in remarkable detail by a man who died in 1519, working alone, trusting his eyes over ancient authority. The earth moved beneath his feet, The stars wheeled overhead, and Leonardo watched, measured, and understood. But as his insights grew, his contemporaries grew impatient. Chapter 12. The Problem of Perfection. A pattern emerges across Leonardo's lifetime, visible to anyone who traces his career. The Adoration of the Magi, commissioned in 1481, sketched in brilliant underdrawing on a wooden panel, then abandoned when he left for Milan. The monument to Francesco Sforza, 17 years of preparation, the clay model magnificent, but never cast in bronze. The Battle of Anghiari, preparatory drawings among his finest work, the actual wall painting a deteriorating failure. St. Jerome in the Wilderness, exquisitely begun, never completed. The second version of the Virgin of the Rocks, promised in 1491, not delivered until 1508, and even then possibly finished by assistants. Of approximately 20 paintings firmly attributed to Leonardo, only about 15 survive, and of those, many are unfinished. The statistics are even more striking for sculpture and engineering projects. Hundreds of designs, almost nothing built. Why? His contemporaries noticed. Patrons grew frustrated. The prior at Santa Maria delle Grazie complained about Leonardo's work habits on the Last Supper, standing motionless for hours, making a few brush strokes, then disappearing for days. When commissioned to paint, Leonardo produced notebooks full of inventions instead. When hired as military engineer, he became obsessed with anatomy. His mind would not stay confined to the task at hand. Part of the problem was his experimental nature. Leonardo rarely accepted traditional techniques. For the Last Supper, he invented a new method that failed. For the Battle of Anghiari, he tried mixing oil into wall paint with disastrous results. His curiosity drove him to test new approaches, but experiments often fail. A more conventional artist, using proven methods, would have completed far more work. Part was perfectionism. Leonardo's standard for completion sat impossibly high. He carried the Mona Lisa for years, adding microscopic refinements. No painting ever quite matched the vision in his mind. Better to keep working, keep improving, than to declare something finished and face its inadequacy. Part was the nature of his intellect. New ideas arrived constantly, each more fascinating than the last. While painting a portrait, he might become obsessed with the optical properties of the eye, leading to dissections, leading to studies of light, leading to observations about the moon, leading to... The chain of curiosity had no end. Finishing the portrait meant ignoring all these branching paths of investigation, and part was simply practical. Leonardo attempted projects beyond the technology of his time. The Gran Cavallo required bronze casting techniques that didn't exist. The flying machines needed materials and power sources not yet invented. The hydraulic projects demanded resources beyond what patrons would commit. Many of his grandest visions were literally impossible in the 15th century. There is also fear to consider. An unfinished work cannot be judged completely. It exists in potential, protected by the excuse of incompletion. A finished work stands naked before critics. Leonardo faced rivalry with Michelangelo, comparison with Raphael, the judgment of patrons and posterity. Perhaps leaving things unfinished was a kind of shield. His defenders point to the works he did complete. The Last Supper, despite its technical problems, revolutionized narrative painting. The Mona Lisa, though carried to his death, achieved a perfection that justifies its fame. The Virgin of the Rocks exists in two versions, both masterpieces. The anatomical drawings, though unpublished, represent breakthrough discoveries. Perhaps Leonardo's method, slow, perfectionist, experimental, digressive, was the only way his particular genius could operate. But the incomplete works haunt his legacy. What would the Battle of Anghiari have been if the technique had succeeded? What if the Gran Cavallo had been cast? What if he had published his anatomical discoveries, advancing medicine by centuries? What if the flying machines had been built? These questions can never be answered. Leonardo was a man of infinite vision, working with finite time, Renaissance technology, and a restless mind that could never quite settle on any single pursuit, long enough to see it through completely. The tragedy and the glory are inseparable. The same quality that let him see so far made it impossible to finish the journey. Then, France offered him freedom from demands. Chapter 13. The Invitation, Rome, 1516. Leonardo is 64 years old and he feels the weight of those years. His right hand trembles with partial paralysis, likely a stroke, though he is left-handed and can still draw. But painting requires both hands, and his greatest skill is diminishing just as he needs it most. He has been in Rome for 3 years, living in the Belvedere of the Vatican, given rooms and a stipend by Pope Leo VI, who is Giuliano de' Medici's brother. But Rome belongs to younger artists now. Raphael, only 33, commands the great papal commissions, his frescoes in the Vatican chambers dazzling all who see them. Michelangelo, at 41, has completed the Sistine Chapel ceiling and terrifies rivals with his genius and temper. Leonardo receives a pension, respect for past achievements, but no major projects. He occupies himself with geometry, with mirrors, with plans to drain the Pontine marshes. But he feels sidelined, a relic of an earlier age. Then the invitation arrives from France. King Francis I, 22 years old, embodies the new Renaissance prince, military victor at the Battle of Marignano, patron of arts and learning, builder of palaces, collector of Italian culture. He has met Leonardo, perhaps in Bologna in 1515, when Francis entered Italy in triumph. The young king was captivated. Francis offers Leonardo a title, premier painter and engineer and architect to the king. He offers a generous annual pension of 1,000 écus. Most importantly, he offers freedom. No specific commissions required, no demands for completed work, simply the honor of having Leonardo da Vinci in France available for consultation. A living symbol of Italian genius gracing the French court. Leonardo accepts. In autumn 1516, he prepares for the journey across the Alps. At 64, in declining health, he will leave Italy forever. He packs carefully. His notebooks, as many as he can carry, his scientific instruments, and 3 paintings, the works he cannot abandon. The Mona Lisa, still not quite finished after 13 years, the Virgin and Child with Saint Anne, a composition he has worked on since 1503, and Saint John the Baptist, with its enigmatic, androgynous figure pointing upward. Francesco Melzi, his devoted student and companion, accompanies him. Melzi is 24, aristocratic, utterly faithful. He has been with Leonardo for years, serving as secretary, assistant, friend. Now, he will follow his master to France. The journey is arduous. The Alpine passes in autumn are cold, the roads difficult. Leonardo travels by mule, the paintings carefully wrapped and packed. Crossing the mountains, leaving behind Florence and Milan and Rome, the cities that shaped him, the landscapes he studied for 60 years. They arrive in Amboise, in the Loire Valley, as winter approaches. King Francis has given Leonardo a manor house, the Château du Clos Lucé, a beautiful brick and marble residence just a few hundred meters from the king's own Château d'Amboise. The houses are connected by an underground passage. allowing Francis to visit whenever he wishes without ceremony. The manor is spacious, comfortable. Leonardo is given rooms for his studio, for his notebooks, for his instruments. Melzi has his own quarters. There are gardens, views of the Loire, quiet spaces for contemplation. For the first time in decades, perhaps in his entire life, Leonardo has what he has never quite found: security without demands, patronage without pressure, respect without rivalry. Francis III treats him not as an employee, but as an honored guest, almost as a father figure. The king visits often, sits with Leonardo, listens to his ideas, asks questions, learns. Leonardo settles into Clos Lucé. Winter deepens over the Loire Valley. At 64, in a foreign country, speaking imperfect French, he finds something unexpected: peace. In France, Leonardo found something he'd never had: peace. Chapter 14. The Loire Years, Château de Clos Lucé, 15–17. Morning light filters through the leaded windows of Leonardo's studio. He rises slowly now, the paralysis in his right hand a constant reminder of age, the stiffness in his joints requiring patience. But there is no rush, no patron waiting impatiently for a commissioned work, no rival breathing down his neck, no political intrigue forcing sudden departures. He descends to the great hall where Melzi has already laid out breakfast. They eat together, discussing the day ahead. Perhaps some correspondence to attend to, letters from Italy, inquiries from scholars. Perhaps work on the notebooks, organizing observations from decades past. Perhaps simply observation, the lifelong habit of watching and recording. The manor house itself delights him. Built in red brick with white stone trim, it combines elegance with comfort. His bedchamber on the upper floor overlooks gardens that slope down toward the Loire. The studio has excellent northern light. There are rooms for his books, for his instruments, for the accumulation of a lifetime's work. The kitchens provide good food. The fireplaces keep the rooms warm through the Loire Valley winters. King Francis visits often, sometimes through the underground passage that connects Clos Lucé to the royal chateau. He is young enough to be Leonardo's grandson, yet he treats the old master with profound respect. They talk for hours about art, about engineering, about philosophy. Francis wants to learn. Leonardo, who spent so many years guarding his knowledge in private notebooks, finally has someone eager to receive it. The relationship is genuine. Years later, after Leonardo's death, Francis will speak to the sculptor Benvenuto Cellini about Leonardo in terms of deepest admiration. There had never been another man born in the world who knew as much as Leonardo, not so much about painting, sculpture, and architecture, as that he was a very great philosopher. Leonardo designs for Francis, though nothing requiring the completion of actual paintings. He plans a new palace at Romorantin, an ambitious project involving not just architecture, but urban planning, a network of canals that would bring the Loire to the palace, provide transportation, supply fresh water, enable hygiene. The drawings are magnificent. The palace is never built, but Francis treasures the designs. Leonardo continues working on the Mona Lisa. Even now, after 14 years, he adds touches, subtle adjustments to the shadows around her eyes, refinements to the atmospheric perspective of the background. Perhaps she will never be finished. Perhaps finished is not the point. The painting has become his companion, a lifetime's study of what paint can capture. He designs festivals for the French court. This has always been part of his work. The theatrical machinery, the spectacular illusions that delight aristocratic audiences. For Francis, he creates automated lions that walk across the floor, and open their chests to reveal fleur-de-lis, symbol of French royalty. He designs elaborate costumes, stage sets, mechanical wonders. The court gasps and applauds. For Leonardo, these are exercises in mechanics and psychology, how to create wonder, how to make the impossible seem real. In spring 1518, great festivities are organized at the Château d'Amboise. The occasion is double, celebrating the birth of the Dauphin, the Crown Prince, and the marriage of Lorenzo di Piero de' Medici to Madeleine de la Tour d'Auvergne, connecting Italian and French nobility. Leonardo directs the celebrations. He orchestrates the pageantry, coordinates the performances, ensures every detail serves the overall effect. The event is remembered as one of the most spectacular of the age. Young French painters come to study with him. He teaches them what Verrocchio taught him 50 years ago, to observe carefully, to understand anatomy, to see how light transforms form. The transmission of knowledge, master to student, continuing across generations. Among his pupils is Jean Clouet, who will become court painter and carry Leonardo's Italian techniques into French art. Leonardo also maintains his scientific curiosity. His notebooks from these years show he is still thinking, still observing, still trying to understand. He studies the formation of clouds. He continues his investigations into geometry, filling pages with diagrams, exploring mathematical relationships. He draws up plans for canal systems that could transform French agriculture and commerce. Mostly, though, there is time for reflection. Long afternoons in the garden, watching the play of light on water. Evenings by the fire, reviewing old notebooks, seeing the through line of his life's work. The branching patterns that repeat from blood vessels to rivers to tree limbs. The principles of motion and force that govern everything from bird flight to water flow to human gesture. The conviction that nature operates by mathematical law, that everything is connected, that observation and reason can penetrate to truth. Melzi remains his constant companion, secretary, and friend. The young man copies Leonardo's notes, helps organize the vast accumulation of papers, ensures his master's comfort. When Leonardo's hand trembles too much to write clearly, Melzi writes at his dictation. It is a relationship of genuine love, not romantic, but the deep affection between teacher and devoted student. The people of Amboise grow accustomed to the old Italian master. They see him walking slowly through the town, Melzi at his side, observing the river, the architecture, the daily life of the Loire Valley. Some recognize him as the great Leonardo da Vinci. Others know him simply as the honored guest of their king, the old gentleman at Clos Lucé. These are perhaps the happiest years of Leonardo's life. Not the most productive in terms of completed works, not the most dramatic or celebrated, but the most peaceful. After a lifetime of wandering, of uncompleted projects, of political upheavals and disappointed patrons, he has found a place where he is valued simply for being who he is, Leonardo, whose knowledge spans the cosmos, whose curiosity never dims, whose presence alone is considered treasure enough. The seasons turn. Spring 1517 becomes summer, autumn, winter. Another spring arrives, 1518, then another winter. Leonardo continues his quiet work, his teaching, his observation. But time, as he has studied so carefully in his notebooks, moves in only one direction. But the notebooks contained knowledge the world would not see for centuries. Chapter 15. Visions of the Future. Imagine opening Leonardo's notebooks in 1519 and truly understanding what you were seeing. Page after page of machines that cannot possibly exist, designs for technologies that have no names yet, principles of science that will not be discovered for centuries. Here is an armored vehicle, low and rounded like a turtle's shell, bristling with cannons pointing in every direction. Men inside turn cranks to move the wheels, protected by the metal shell. Leonardo calls it a covered chariot. 500 years later, at the Battle of the Somme, tanks will crawl across no man's land using exactly this principle, mobile armor providing protection while delivering firepower. Here is what Leonardo calls an organ. 33 barrels arranged in 3 rows of 11. While one row fires, another cools, the third reloads. Continuous fire without pause. The ancestor of the machine gun, sketched in the 1480s, nearly 400 years before Gatling's rotating barrel gun. Here are designs for vessels that travel underwater. Leonardo understands the principle. SEAL men inside a watertight hull provide air somehow, navigate beneath the surface to attack ships from below. But he deliberately keeps these designs incomplete, writing that he will not publish them because of the evil nature of men who practice assassination at the bottom of the sea. Even in imagination, he recognizes the moral weight of his inventions. Here is the aerial screw, the spiral of linen that would lift itself into the air by pushing down on the atmosphere. The principle is sound. This is how helicopters work. But the power source does not exist. Human muscles cannot turn it fast enough. It will take internal combustion engines and refined engineering before Igor Sikorsky achieves sustained helicopter flight in 1942. Here is a parachute, a pyramid of sealed linen cloth held rigid by wooden poles. Leonardo's note claims a man with this device can throw himself down from any great height without suffering any injury. In 2000, a British skydiver named Adrian Nicholas tests Leonardo's design, constructing it exactly as drawn. It works perfectly, providing a stable descent, though the landing is hard due to the weight of the wooden frame. Here are concave mirrors designed to focus sunlight and heat water. Solar power, conceived 5 centuries before photovoltaic cells. Here is a mechanical calculator with gears and wheels to perform arithmetic, sketched a century before Wilhelm Schickard builds his calculating clock. Here, in the Codex Leicester, a note to himself: make eyeglasses to see the moon larger. The telescope, imagined a century before Galileo, points one at the heavens. And woven through all the inventions are scientific observations that precede their official discovery. The Earth's geological history written in layers of rock and fossilized shells. The moon's light reflected from the sun. The Earth's motion around the sun, not the reverse. The kinship between humans and apes, stated casually, without controversy. The 4 chambers of the heart. The circulation of blood, though he doesn't fully understand it. The development of the fetus in the womb. The principles of hydraulics, of friction, of the strength of materials. Leonardo's method was revolutionary. Observe nature directly. Trust your eyes over ancient authority. Test hypotheses through experiment. Draw what you actually see rather than what tradition claims. This is the scientific method, emerging a century before Francis Bacon and Descartes formalize it. But it remained locked in notebooks, written in mirror script, scattered across Italy, unknown to the world. The future Leonardo designed sat waiting in dusty collections, invisible, until the 19th century, when scholars finally began systematic study of his papers. Then the revelation: this man had seen it all, 500 years early. As winter came in 1519, Leonardo prepared his final testament. Chapter 16. The Will, April 23, 1519. Château du Clos, Lucé. Leonardo lies in his bedchamber, the same room where he has slept for nearly 3 years, looking out over gardens he has come to know well. But today he is not observing the play of light on leaves or the patterns of clouds. Today he is putting his affairs in order. He summons Maître Bourreau, the royal attorney of Amboise. French law requires wills be dictated in French and properly witnessed. Leonardo's French is imperfect after only 3 years, but Melzi helps, translating where necessary. The witnesses gather, Melzi himself, and others from the household. Leonardo begins with his soul. He commends it to God, to the Virgin Mary, to the angels and saints. Despite his scientific skepticism about many matters, he observes the proprieties. He requests burial at the Church of Saint-Florentin within the Château d'Amboise, with a ceremony appropriate to his station. He wants masses said for his soul, 3 high masses, 30 low masses. The rituals matter, even to a man who dissected bodies searching for the seat of consciousness and found only anatomy. Then the practical matters, money for his servants. His housekeeper Mathurine receives a cloak of good black cloth, lined with fur, plus payment of wages owed. Other servants receive their due. He arranges for funeral expenses for the poor who will carry candles in his funeral procession. To his half-brothers back in Tuscany, the legitimate sons of Ser Piero, who inherited the family property Leonardo was barred from claiming, he leaves a modest sum from money held in Florence. No bitterness in the bequest, but no particular generosity either. They are blood, but they were never truly family. And then, the inheritance that matters. To Messer Francesco Melzi, nobleman of Milan, Leonardo leaves everything else. All his books, all his instruments and tools, all his drawings and notebooks, the thousands of pages documenting a lifetime of observation and invention. The paintings still in his possession, including the Mona Lisa that he carried from Florence to Milan, to Rome, to France. The furniture, the clothing, the accumulation of personal effects. Melzi, sitting in the room as this is dictated, must understand the weight of what he is receiving. Not just material possessions, but the intellectual legacy of Leonardo da Vinci. Every sketch of flying machines, every anatomical study, every observation about water and light and geology, every half-formed theory and completed masterpiece. Did Leonardo understand the value of what he was leaving? The notebooks alone contain discoveries that could revolutionize medicine, advance engineering, transform scientific understanding. But Leonardo has never published, never systematized his knowledge for the world. He is leaving it to Melzi not as a gift to humanity, but as a personal bequest to the person he loves most. The will is witnessed, signed, sealed. Leonardo has done what men do when they feel death approaching, arranged for masses, provided for servants, settled debts, designated an heir. But there is an absence in the will worth noting. No mention of grand projects uncompleted, no instructions for publishing his notebooks, no concern for his scientific legacy. The man who saw 5 centuries into the future leaves his knowledge in the hands of a single devoted student, with no particular plan for what should come next. 9 days later, his breathing will change. But on April 23, 1519, the will is completed. The papers are in order, and Leonardo can rest, knowing his affairs are settled. 9 days later, his breathing changed. Chapter 17. The last day dawn breaks over the Loire Valley. In his bedchamber at Clos-Lucé, Leonardo lies propped against pillows, his breathing labored. Melzi sits beside him as he has sat through the night, watching his master's chest rise and fall with increasing difficulty. The room is familiar, comfortable. Through the windows, if Leonardo turns his head, He can see the gardens, the trees budding with late spring growth. The light is good. It is always good in this room, the reason he chose it for his bedchamber. Even now, perhaps he notices how the morning sun catches the edge of the window frame, creating that precise division between light and shadow he has studied his entire life. What does a man think about in his final hours? Does Leonardo review his life, the illegitimate boy from Vinci who became the most famous artist in Europe? Does he see faces, his uncle Francesco teaching him to observe nature, Verrocchio watching him paint the angel, Ludovico Sforza commissioning the great horse, Lisa Gherardini sitting for her portrait, King Francis visiting to discuss philosophy? Does he think of the unfinished works? The Battle of Anghiari, deteriorating on the wall in Florence. The anatomical treatise never published, the flying machines never built. The 100 projects abandoned when the next idea proved more compelling. A lifetime of visions, only a fraction realized. Or perhaps at the end, there is simply breathing. The body's insistence on its own rhythms, independent of thought or will. Breath in, breath out. The mechanism he studied so carefully in his anatomical drawings, now failing in his own chest. Melzi holds his hand. This young man, only 27 years old, who has devoted himself to serving Leonardo for over a decade. Later, writing to Leonardo's half-brothers in Florence, Melzi will describe his master's death with words full of love and grief. I believe it is known to you of the death of Maestro Leonardo, your brother, and to me the best of fathers. It is impossible for me to express the grief I feel at his death, and while my body holds together, I shall feel perpetual unhappiness, and with reason, seeing that he showed toward me daily the most devoted and warmest love. The best of fathers. Leonardo never married, never had children of his own. But in Melzi he found something like a son, and Melzi found in Leonardo something like a father, the relationship of teaching and devotion that perhaps meant more to Leonardo than blood ties ever could. There is a legend, beautiful but false, that persists through the centuries. The painter François-Guillaume Ménageot will immortalize it in a grand canvas in 1781. King Francis I cradling the dying Leonardo in his arms, the young king weeping as the old master expires. The scene is pure invention. Francis was at Saint-Germain-en-Laye on May 2, 1519, celebrating the birth of his second son. He was nowhere near Amboise, but the legend reveals a truth deeper than fact. Francis loved Leonardo. The grief when he received news of the death was genuine. The relationship had been real, mentor and student, wisdom and youth, Italy and France, meeting in mutual respect. If Francis could have been there, he would have been. The reality is quieter. Leonardo dies in his bed at Clos-Lucé, age 67, with Melzi at his side. No dramatic last words are recorded, no final pronouncement on art or science, just the ceasing of breath, the stilling of the most remarkable mind of the Renaissance. The body lies in state. Arrangements proceed according to the will. Funeral expenses, masses, the poor of Amboise hired to carry candles. But the burial is delayed. Perhaps the Church of Saint-Florentin needs preparation. Perhaps there are diplomatic considerations. This is not just a man, but a symbol of Italian culture in France, King Francis's prized acquisition. The burial does not take place until August 12th, more than 3 months after the death. Leonardo's remains are laid to rest in the Collegiate Church of Saint-Florentin, within the grounds of the Château d'Amboise. The ceremony befits a man of his station, the premier painter and engineer and architect to the King of France. Masses are said, prayers are offered. And in the studio at Clos Luce, Melzi begins the enormous task of sorting through what Leonardo left behind. Notebooks by the dozen, loose papers covered with sketches and calculations, the paintings, the Mona Lisa gazing out with her enigmatic smile, still not quite finished, still perfect. The body is buried, but the mind, the observations, the inventions, the visions of 500 years hence, the mind remains, scattered across thousands of pages, waiting. What did Leonardo leave behind? Chapter 18, The Scattered Legacy, Clos Luce, May 1519. Francesco Melzi stands in Leonardo's studio, surrounded by the inheritance. Notebooks stacked on tables, loose sheets covered with mirror writing, bound codices containing thousands of pages, drawings rolled and tied with ribbon, paintings leaning against walls, the accumulation of 67 years of observation and genius. Melzi understands, perhaps better than anyone, what he possesses. He has watched Leonardo work, has copied his notes, has listened to his theories about everything from the formation of clouds to the mechanics of the human heart. This is not just paper and ink. This is knowledge that could transform the world. He packs everything carefully and begins the journey back to Italy. Across the Alps again, the notebooks and paintings traveling by mule and cart, returning to the country Leonardo left 3 years earlier. Melzi settles at his family's villa in Va Priodata near Milan. There, for the next 50 years, he becomes the guardian of Leonardo's legacy. He tries to organize the chaos. Leonardo never systematized his notebooks, never prepared them for publication. Observations about water flow sit beside architectural sketches, beside anatomical studies, beside geometric proofs, all jumbled together in mirror script. Melzi begins the enormous task of sorting by subject, transcribing selections, attempting to create coherent treatises from fragmentary notes. He compiles material on painting, drawing from notebooks spanning decades. This will eventually be published in 1651, more than a century after Leonardo's death, as the treatise on painting. It will influence generations of artists, establishing Leonardo as a theorist as well as practitioner. But it represents only a fraction of the notebook's contents. Melzi dies in 1570. He has protected the notebooks for 51 years, but he has published almost nothing. And now they pass to his son, Orazio Melzi. Orazio is not his father. He does not understand what these dusty papers mean. They are old notebooks filled with backward writing and strange drawings, left by an artist who died before Orazio was born. They clutter the villa. When collectors and scholars inquire, Orazio is generous. He gives notebooks away, sells others for modest sums, happy to clear space. The collection fragments. Pompeo Leoni, a sculptor working in Spain, acquires many notebooks and reassembles them into larger codices, cutting and pasting pages without regard for Leonardo's original organization. The Codex Atlanticus, the largest collection, over 1,000 pages, is created this way, a magnificent jumble. Other notebooks travel to France, to England, to private collections across Europe. Some are lost entirely. Fire takes some. Neglect destroys others. Wars scatter collections. The French Revolution nearly obliterates Leonardo's tomb when the church of St. Florentin is demolished. His bones are lost for decades before being rediscovered and moved to the chapel of St. Hubert at Amboise in 1874. But some notebooks survive. The Codex Atlanticus reaches the Biblioteca Ambrosiana in Milan. The Royal Collection at Windsor Castle acquires hundreds of drawings. The Institut de France in Paris receives 12 manuscript books. The British Museum obtains the Codex Arundel. Each institution treasures what it has, but doesn't necessarily understand its significance. For centuries, Leonardo's scientific work remains largely unknown. He is remembered as the painter of the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper, perhaps as an inventor of fanciful machines. But the depth of his anatomical knowledge, the sophistication of his geological observations, the prescience of his engineering, all this stays hidden in notebooks scattered across Europe, written in mirror script that few can read. Then, in the 19th century, scholars begin serious study. They transcribe the mirror writing. They organize the drawings by subject. They realize what they are looking at, a Renaissance mind that anticipated discoveries made centuries later. In 1967, there is a final revelation. The Madrid Codices, 2 notebooks containing 700 pages, are rediscovered in the Biblioteca Nacional de España, where they had been catalogued incorrectly and forgotten for over a century. Suddenly, more of Leonardo's engineering genius emerges. Detailed studies of mechanics, precise drawings of machines, investigations into the principles of motion and force. Each discovery reinforces the same conclusion. Leonardo saw further than anyone in his time. His anatomical drawings match modern medical textbooks in accuracy. His principles of hydraulics are sound. His understanding of geology anticipates plate tectonics. His designs for flying machines embody correct aerodynamic principles, needing only materials and power sources his century could not provide. The tragedy is transmission. Had Leonardo published during his lifetime, had his anatomical discoveries reached physicians, had his engineering principles been widely known, human knowledge might have advanced by centuries. Instead, the insights died with him, locked in notebooks, and humanity had to rediscover everything independently. But the notebooks survived, and slowly, across 5 centuries, the world learned to read them. Leonardo's conversation with the future finally found its audience, and the future finally learned to listen. We remember Leonardo now primarily as a painter, the creator of the Mona Lisa's enigmatic smile, the genius behind the Last Supper's dramatic moment. Millions visit the Louvre each year to stand before Lisa Gherardini's portrait, seeking to understand what makes her gaze so compelling. But the notebooks have restored his full dimension. We see now what his contemporaries could not. Leonardo was inventing the future, sketching helicopters and tanks, understanding anatomy with precision that matches our textbooks, observing geological time when the Church allowed Earth only 6,000 years. What made him unique was the fusion, art and science as one pursuit, observation and imagination inseparable. He refused the boundaries that divide disciplines. A painter who dissected corpses, an engineer who studied bird flight by watching swallows, a scientist who trusted his eyes over ancient authority. His weakness was completion. He left works unfinished, knowledge unpublished, visions unrealized. What he lost, immediate impact. What he gained, immortality. 5 centuries later, his inventions materialize exactly as sketched. His observations are confirmed by instruments he never imagined. He speaks to us still from those mirror-written pages about the inexhaustible wonder of seeing clearly. Sweet dreams, and we'll meet again soon for another story.